Hello, welcome to No Veto Video. I'm one of your hosts, Catherine.
And I'm Carson. And this week we bring you Viral from 2016. Directed by Henry Joost, Ariel Schulman, written by Barbara Marshall and Christopher Landon, and starring Sophia Black-Delia, Annalee Tipton, and Travis Tope.
Viral is a teen coming-of-age story set against a epidemic and quarantine. And that's what I want to say. And its central relationship is a sibling relationship, a sister's relationship.
I had seen this probably the year it came out, I guess, because I was going to say about 2 years ago, on Netflix, and I thought it did some unique things. There's a lot of tropes in there that are used heavily in the genre as well, but you kind of have to just to make the story work. Otherwise it becomes some sort of other movie. But it did do a few unique things, and I thought it'd be a good movie to show you. I know you were a little skeptical at first when
Incredibly skeptical.
And it has higher ratings than most of the movies I show you.
It does. It does. And I think as we sort of think about how to start our conversation, one of the things that makes me wonder about it being a stronger or more rigorous sort of way of telling the story is around, and following Frances McDormand's speech at the Oscars, there's a lot of ideas about how do we make sure that all the voices who need to be at the table are at the table in filmmaking. And I think one of the things that makes this movie a stronger movie, for me at least, is what feels like the very obvious presence of a woman in the writer's room or on the writing staff. That there's something authentic and real about how the sisters interact, and it just, there's something human at the heart of a sort of wacky story. And for me, that's certainly like what I'm looking for in whatever movie I'm watching, is for there to be this sort of sense of like what the heart of the story is. And there's a real heart in this movie, even while you've got like creepy things and jump scares and all the other elements of a horror movie. But you need this other thing too. When the title came on, when the credits came on and we saw that it was from Blumhouse, and sort of reflecting on the fact that we've watched a number of Blumhouse films in the last year, or a couple of years. And just, I wonder if there's something about how they look at their projects and approach their projects that maybe makes it a little bit better. I don't know, because they also produce other stuff that really has no appeal for me. So I kind of like, I'm in between on them, but it's happened enough that I've enjoyed their films that it raises for me this question mark about their understanding of how heart and horror like interact.
And while we were watching it, you also commented when Dimensions logo came up, and they have also done
that doesn't necessarily make me excited to see it, though.
They're a mixed bag. They've had some really good movies and some really bad movies, but normally their movies are at least well done, even if they don't appeal to us.
Right, yeah.
So that had that going for it too.
Definitely.
There were a few, as I said, things I found unique. I don't want to give a whole lot away because the movie's still relatively new, but the monster itself, and you've commented on the way it moved and behaved.
The sound effects.
And the sound effects,
were very creepy. There was this sort of gross out factor to it too.
Yeah.
I mean, a little bit. And set up very nicely. This film takes a lot of pains to point out how plausible this implausible thing is. I mean, like, seriously, because they have, they use stock footage, they use archival footage from other outbreaks, even other parasitic outbreaks that have happened in the real world. And so you've got this archival footage, and you've got an actual science class with, like, good science content and not, like, made-up science content about the subject matter in question.
Yeah.
And then that knowledge is used later on in the film. And so I think there's this way in which this movie sort of wants to say, this is a thing maybe not to be afraid of, but, like, is not so far beyond the realm of possibility, so far beyond the realm of thought.
Yeah, and even how they tried dealing with the creature, not how the government was trying to deal with it, but how the residents of the town that we were following were dealing with it. They were taking a very scientific approach, using what they had learned from their science class, as well as what they were finding in medical books.
And yet also the behavior of the teenagers felt so teenagery.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it was exactly, utterly predictable. And not in a bad way. You know,
No.
sometimes we say, thus and such film was predictable, or I was never surprised by it or startled by it. And this film has a little of that. Like, I would say, especially if you're an aficionado of this type of film, you're going to see all the moves pretty much broadcast ahead of time. Like, you're going to be able to call the steps of it. It actually made it an easier film for me to watch, because I kind of could see that the scares were coming. And since I didn't want to be scared, I could, close my eyes. But I don't know.
You're right, though. Like, even down to the teens going, I can do this. And, as common sense gets beaten into us, or life gets beaten out of us, or whatever it is, self-confidence gets beaten out of us, we start going, I don't know if I can do this. All right, well, I'll try, but I'm probably not going to succeed.
Well, maybe, but I also think there's something about, like, there's a terrible thing going on, and we've been told to behave in a sensible way, but we are teenagers, and we believe that we are invincible and that no bad will come to us, and so we're going to do a very, very risky thing.
Yeah, you're thinking of different scenes than I'm thinking of, but
yeah.
You're right, that's the other side of it.
But even then, like, the ways in which, like, the objects of being sensible are used in very nonsensible ways feels very true to adolescence. Like, there's in fact, that, like, one of the main characters is a lot more rigid than the other.
Yes.
And feels like somebody who's more grown up, even, and wants to be more sensible. But she also sort of has this naivete about her, and so there's this balance of, like, the responsible but naive, and the responsible but naive younger sister, and then the sort of streetwiser, but not entirely responsible older sister.
Yeah, kind of rash.
Yeah, rash. That's a good word for it. And the interplay of two very different siblings.
And then their interplay with some of the other characters too, especially like the one sister's interplay with friends of the other and vice versa, rather than their own comrades. Peers.
Yeah. Because they're actually different. Now, this film suffers from what every film that features teenage actors, and some of these people look old. Like,
I didn't think they looked older than their 20s, but
the older sister was practically 30, when this film was shot.
Wow.
She was 28 years old. The younger sister was 25, and her love interest was also 25 when they shot this film. Or they may have been a little younger when the film was shot, but...
I guess, well then, if I said in their 20s.
Yeah. I just say that... So there's this... As you're watching the older sibling, for me, this is... I'm hard on old women, apparently. Like, if you remember, I had trouble with The Dressmaker for the same reason. That there was just sort of like... you sure you're in high school, honey? Like, anyway, this is a failing of Katherine.
They're going for their...
I'm just confessing a failure of mine. It's not necessarily a failure of the film. If you're used to watching movies of teenagers that are played by people in their 30s, this is not going to bother you at all.
You know, they're just going back for their second diploma.
I guess that's it. Wow, I would not for anything. I would not go back to high school. I just would never... The only way I'm willing to go back to high school is while watching horror movies.
Yes.
And it just confirms to me why I don't want to go back to high school.
Yes, the song Money for That from Shiny Toy Guns has never had anything that you identify with.
No, it really doesn't.
That's been a discussion in the past, if you couldn't tell.
So what do we want to say about this movie that doesn't give away too much?
Yeah, I've been working on that. I mean, we normally discuss the technicals of the movie, and we haven't done that yet.
Okay. So from my perspective, this is a perfectly adequate film. It neither excels nor fails at what it sets out to do. Mm-hmm. It's got some pretty obvious, like, stitching in of things that didn't happen, like, for the shooting of this movie.
Yeah.
And it's got, at one point, there's a pretty obvious CGI insertion. But that, again, didn't bother me. In fact, like I said, I thought the creature effects were particularly creepy, which makes them particularly effective for this film. And really, like, lo-fi. Like, I think they could have probably done it mechanically. And it really is effective. It's incredibly creepy.
I think just the way it moved so fluidly, it probably wasn't done mechanically, but it could have been. The pacing, I thought, was almost perfect throughout the movie, except for a couple of scenes that felt a little slow, maybe. But almost everything else, the pacing was right on. They didn't really extend scenes too much past where they needed to go. There weren't a lot of extraneous scenes either.
The kid played by Travis Tope has a very bad dye job.
Oh, well.
But that could have been a choice.
I was going to say, I remember high school. I remember people with bad dye jobs.
It was bad. It was really bad. Like unnaturally black. Unnaturally black hair.
I knew people like that.
I know, I did too. But
yeah. I don't think that's a flaw in the movie. I think
it could have been a choice, but if it wasn't a choice, it was bad. It was like the only misstep.
Yeah.
If it wasn't a choice.
That seemed legit to me. I don't know.
I didn't get a read off of this guy that he dyed his hair, so I thought that maybe it was just a misstep.
So, did you feel it captured the high school setting well?
I do. I mean, granted, it's been a while since I've been in high school. In fact, I will have been out of high school. Like, this is one of those big ones coming up.
Yep.
20 years? Maybe?
Yep.
I've been out of high school for 20 years. I excelled at math. So my experience of high school is probably quite a bit different. And yet this felt, for the time that we spend in the school part, legit. Like it felt like something that could actually like happen. And I think what happens very, very early on is that there's this imposition of the government in ways that feel a little false to me. But I think there's something that the filmmakers want to say about the experience of adolescence and they use this metaphor of the imposition of the government, coming in and like messing stuff up. And so, like, I don't mind that they got the factual responses to what might occur in a dramatic, plague situation wrong, but yeah.
The only things I found odd about the high school setting, from my experiences, and granted, next year I'll have been out of high school 25 years, so I'm a little far removed, but the one I had a comment on while we were watching is, I don't remember them teaching us parasitology and bio in high school. I had 2 years of bio in high school. The second one was an advanced course, and
that didn't bother me because a couple of reasons. There's a out of film reason why I think that it might happen in that, in the same way that like our parents weren't taught plate tectonics.
Yeah.
But we were.
Well, and that's why I was saying I've been out 25 years, maybe.
But I think that character also like reveals that he had a job at a more advanced level of education, yes, and that he's kind of slumming with high schoolers. And so there's an in-world reason why he may be
changing the curriculum a bit.
Advancing.
Yeah.
Like giving a more advanced level of information than maybe those folks would strictly have. This isn't really a high school movie. It's not a high school movie. It's an adolescence movie. And I think it's really about leaving adolescence behind because it's about making choices for self-sacrifice. It's about making choices that, like doing a thing that you don't want to do because it's the right thing to do. Which for me is like that's the movement into adulthood.
Yeah.
Is when you begin to say what I want and what I desire and what I feel like I have to do aren't always what has to happen. And that's a very tough move to make. And some adults never get there. But I think the characters do. But I feel like they're sort of forced there over the course of the film.
And as you said at the beginning, it's a coming-of-age movie.
It's a coming-of-age movie.
One of the characters I don't think would have gotten to that point, but we'll never know.
We'll never know. And you guys will know as soon as you see him
who
that might be. You will just know right off the bat.
Yes. I'm not even quite sure why they associate with them. And actually later in the movie they don't know either. So.
But I would say, like, so what are some things we like about this film? I like that this film passes the Bechdel test, like...
I thought of that earlier
soars over it, like does very, very well, and that the arcs of the female characters really don't have anything to do with pursuing a romantic interest or supporting an important man in his work. There's a lot to be praised for that. A pretty awesome neighbor.
The neighbor was one of my favorite characters.
Pretty awesome.
But he's not in many scenes, so he's easy to forget if you're remembering the overall plot.
And I was thinking about the ways in which this film, like, if all of our societal traumas as Americans are like chords on a harp, this film does a very nice job of plucking a lot of them in subtle ways. Like I think about at one point there's what feels to me a hearkening back to like Katrina, like the trauma around Hurricane Katrina and the really terrible loss of life there, and certainly epidemic scares that we've had around Zika and Ebola, and I think there's a point at which people are sort of getting conspiracy theorist kind of stuff on YouTube, and that feels, kind of 9/11-y to me, or some of the other events that have happened where people sort of jump online and begin to share wildly about who might be behind this or what the source of this is. They leave a lot of the why and how questions unanswered. I think, to their credit, because I think what they're more interested in doing is sort of plucking on these, like, chords of tension and trauma that we have and letting us sort of do some of the lifting on our own.
Well, and ultimately in movies like this, where the thing came from is never really important.
Right.
It's how people react to it. And movies that dwell on the where really never succeed well.
I don't think so. Yeah, I think it's missing that heart.
Well, and there's so many, like, critics can come back and nitpick it. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Whereas if you leave it unanswered, and again, that would just take time from the movie.
And I suppose it depends on the kind of story you're trying to tell.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you know, if you're trying to tell a process or a procedural story of like scientists doing sciencey things, then sure, go right ahead.
Or if you're trying to make a point of it's an evil government and, the government created something.
Right. Go right ahead. Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for this, though, without any of that. Yeah. In fact, at the end, there's sort of a detail about the life of the creature that's added, and it makes sense. Like it's what we need to kind of get out of the last little bit of the film, but it almost feels like an unnecessary. Like an added unnecessary thing. Like the thing itself is bad enough without them doing this other thing.
Yeah.
And that's actually like one scene that doesn't, like I don't quite know what they were going for.
Well, they hinted at it earlier in the movie too.
Yeah, but I don't know like what, like this is what raises for me then the question about life cycle and about, like this begins, like having this detail in the film and, having, it provides a setting for the climactic last moment of the film, but it also, for me, begins to raise, like, biology questions. Yeah. Like, well, what purpose does that... like, they've been doing this other thing all along, and now they're doing this thing, which would suggest, like, a change in life cycle, like a change from one stage to another stage of life cycle. But I couldn't, like... That's not the question that the movie wants me spending my time pondering at that moment. It wants me doing something else.
Yeah.
But I'm going like, oh, well, that's curious. I wonder what I wonder what that means. And I suppose if you, like, and I'm asking all of the wrong questions at that moment. And you've lost me because now I'm having a sort of Richard Attenborough moment.
As an only child, I wanted to ask you, who has a sibling, how realistic that seemed to be portrayed.
So I think I need to make a caveat here, which is to say I have a younger brother, and I suspect, based on my experience with other people, that the experience of having sisters is different than having a cross-gender, person that you grew up with. That's not how you say that, but... I think the experience of growing up as a sister and a brother is different than growing up as two sisters.
Yeah.
That being said, from what I've observed of sisters and what I experienced with, sort of my feelings towards my brother, there is this competition that's real, and also, like, nobody else gets to pick on my sibling. That's real. And, like, that's my job. You're not allowed to take my job. That's anyway.
You had one job.
But I think so. I was sort of I had a more compliant personality than my brother did, and he was, let's say, rasher, or more willing to bend or break rules than I was. And so I think there is something I can relate to the main character, sort of watching the other sibling and like with admiration but also frustration, and that felt real. But then I think there's also something about like who knows the stories of what happens in the family, and that's not always even, and that's not always like shared evenly among siblings. And I think that feels very real. So there's a lot about this that feels real, and there's a lot about it that I can't quite comment on because I don't have the experience that was being shared.
Okay.
But I like the relationship between the sisters, and it felt nuanced. Like it wasn't always the same fight over and over again.
Yeah.
That would be unrealistic. This had moments of tenderness and moments of, live a little, no, we have to follow the rules, conflict, but then also, other kinds of conflict as well.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, a togetherness that I appreciated. And whether it's real or not, I liked it.
As, again, someone who doesn't have siblings, they definitely seemed like a family to me. Just the way they argued.
Yeah, no, definitely a family. And did a nice job of talking about the subtext of their story without making it text all the time.
Yeah.
Well, any last thoughts? Anything that you're thinking about?
One thing I didn't touch on earlier, and you briefly did, but I had wanted to mention it as well. Again, I've never witnessed martial law in the U.S. I don't know what it would actually look like.
Let's keep
anywhere.
it that way, America.
Yeah.
Let's keep it that way.
But some of the things they were doing seemed improbable. Like, no one would do this.
Again, I think it was more metaphorical. Like, I think it was intended to be a metaphor.
Probably was.
Yeah.
I mean, some of it very well could have happened. I don't think that they would have been under orders to do some of it. That they
People are constantly afraid of the CDC, and I think if you ever met anybody from the CDC, you'd like recalibrate your fear factor.
Yeah, well, that too.
This is my opinion.
Yes. They're mostly either bureaucrats or nerds in lab coats. No offense to nerds in lab coats. I also am a nerd, but don't really wear a lab coat.
I think people are afraid of bureaucrats, but
yes, but they're powerless bureaucrats.
You just doubled down on the thing that everyone's afraid of.
No, sorry. To clarify, they are powerless bureaucrats because no one gives them money or respect.
Yes, I think that's true.
There are, based on true story, movies you can watch to examine that in further detail.
That is true. I don't really have any last thoughts.
Oh, yeah?
I think
That's
I'm all
unusual.
Done. It is unusual. I'll think of one later on. So those are our thoughts about the movie Viral. Please come and let us know your thoughts. We are excited to hear what maybe you thought when you watched this movie, or if you want to talk about things that were more spoilery than we can. Just make a note of that in your comment. Leave it down below. We will get back to that and let you know what we think. You can also find us on the website, novetovideo.com, spelled just like it sounds.
That brings us to the portion of the show where we tell you our override choices. And I'll let you explain it, and I'll let you go first because I have 3 this week, and I'm hoping that... So I've really cheated, but I couldn't narrow it down. And I'm hoping you take at least one of them so that I get down to 2.
Okay. Mine is not very good. It's not actually a movie that I enjoyed all that much, but I couldn't help but think of it as I was watching
Well,
this
do you want to back up and explain it?
Yes, so I'll back up and explain. So, let's see. Overrides. Each week on No Veto Video, we take the film that we've watched and suggest to you another film, either in place of or as a companion piece to this movie, and we call it our override. It's additional watching that maybe you can take part in if you are so inclined. So you want me to go first?
Yes, please.
So I'm going first. Mine, actually I need your help. The Ginger Snaps movie with the sisters.
Yes.
What's that?
Ginger Snaps.
Oh.
You did take one of mine!
I thought it was called something else.
No, it's Ginger Snaps.
Oh, okay, Ginger Snaps. There you go. It's got sisters, it's got monsters. It's neither the sisters nor the monsters are as believable as this film. But hey, yeah, I'll take another. Well, we haven't watched it, but it's an Oscar-winning film, so you might as well go out and check that out. but also from Blumhouse, Get Out.
Oh.
So, yeah, I think we should all be watching that.
The whole Ginger Snaps trilogy, in fact, and actually the second movie, in my opinion, is probably stronger than the first.
I'm thinking of a modern one.
Yes, the third one's the back in time one.
Okay.
Ginger Snaps Back.
See, this is why I thought there was another one, like there were, I couldn't think of which number I was thinking of.
Yes.
Which number am I thinking of?
The modern one?
Mm-hmm.
That's 1 and 2. 2 is the stronger one. 2 is a direct sequel.
Okay. 2.
I was picking that because the sister interactions felt very, very similar, and the circumstances they're in were similar. That was going to be my second of the 3 choices. My first one was the 1958 version of The Blob with Steve McQueen. It's got teens or young adults also trying teens trying to save their town from an invasion from...
Okay.
And how did you describe it? A disturbing thing? Icky thing?
I don't know.
And my third one was The Faculty.
Oh!
Which is also teens
Those were teens.
In high school with a parasitic invasion, and some of the dynamic was very similar. Also a very strong movie with a great soundtrack.
Yeah, and a really strong metaphor about, like, teenagers and adults and how we can't see eye to eye. But
the one that captures it best for the coming-of-age movie is definitely the Ginger Snaps trilogy that you mentioned.
Okay, so that's what we recommend. So you can check out any or all of those as you'd like. We have really gone overboard for you guys this week. And we want to take a moment here to talk to you about some changes that are coming for No Veto Video. So what's up next?
Well, we're still going to be doing this format, but we're going to drop down to every other week for this format. The alternating weeks, due to our own personal time constraints at this point, we're going to do, I believe, more of a conversational thing on a topic.
Or we may have, sort of like if you caught up with our Plague episode, we'll have shorter episodes that have just a topical list.
Yeah.
So we'll be kind of letting you know what those will be like. Look for the first one of those next week. And then we'll go back to doing a full episode about responding to a film that we'll also let you know about next week. So come back, check in on us. Definitely check in and subscribe. It'll keep you up to date on what we're doing. If you're looking just for these full episodes, we may title them in a little different way so you can see it. I think they're all going to be worth checking out, and the in-between episodes are going to be shorter, so stick with us.
Yeah, and
I have hiccups.
And we may go back to this format full-time as things change.
Let us know what you think. Or if you've got specific topics about sort of top 5 lists or something that you might want to see from us. Thank you so much. We'll look forward to seeing you guys again next week. Bye.
Bye.